In today's video, we have all the latest NHL trade rumors, including more talk about Patrick Kane possibly leaving Chicago in the near future, with the Rangers and Avs being the teams most interested. We also have the latest trade talk on the Montreal Canadiens, the Ottawa Senators as well as Marc-Andre Fleury. Plus, we have news from the NHL waiver wire. We have another signing, injury updates, and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and rumors to talk about here today. Of course, this is another video coming to you live from Quebec City. I'm filming this in my hotel room. Certainly going to be coming to the end of the trip here very shortly, heading home tomorrow. I don't know if tomorrow's video I'll record here before we take off, or possibly later on in the day once we arrive back home. Vacation's been fun. I hope you enjoyed the videos from the road between Ottawa and Quebec City. It's been fun. I get to take in an event today at the Videotron Center here in Quebec City, which is their relatively new NHL size arena, which is where the Quebec Nordiques would play if they ever get a team back. Beautiful facility, great spot, houses over 18,000 fans, top-notch facility, and I certainly really highly recommend checking it out if you have an opportunity, if you have a chance to take an event in Quebec City, or likely going to have preseason games coming back here for NHL, I would imagine. I know before, with the COVID restrictions and everything the past couple of years, they quite often would have at least one or two preseason games here, usually Montreal against another team, either Ottawa, Toronto, or a different NHL team coming in to play them. So certainly recommend you check it out if you haven't had an opportunity already. When it comes to the NHL waivers news today, Ryan Dzingel, who was on waivers again from San Jose, ended up clearing this time, so he can be reassigned to their minor league affiliate, and the Montreal Canadiens have placed forward Cedric Paquette on waivers as well. He's another name that's been mentioned as the Habs likely would try to find a new home for him before the deadline. He's a guy that might get some interest. The last couple of years haven't really been the best for Paquette, but ultimately there is enough history there that a team might show interest. So we'll find out at 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. Now, we do have another signing here today as well. The Avalanche have extended goaltender Pavel Francouz, who gets a 2-year deal at $2 million per season. So clearly they're quite happy with his play. I know there's still some question marks around Darcy Kemper, whether or not the Avalanche would consider a goalie move before the deadline. I'm personally not so sure we're going to see that, but we'll see what they end up doing. I know there's been links to Fleury, but we'll talk about him here a little bit later on in the video as well. But certainly that's a good signing for the Avalanche to secure their backup goaltending spot here over the next couple of years. Now, when it comes to some injury updates, we might as well stay with the Avalanche here because we have a significant one with Captain Gabriel Landeskog going down, needing some knee surgery. He's expected to be out for about a month. Now, apparently this has been something that's been kind of lingering off and on here for a while, and he's decided to get it looked after now with the hopes and intention of being back in time to not miss any playoff time, hopefully even be back before the end of the regular season. Obviously, with about a 4-week recovery span, that puts him about 2 weeks before the end of the regular season. But as we know, timelines like that are only estimates. We will see what happens, but if the Avalanche were to get some worse news on his recovery and he takes a little bit longer, that also increases the LTIR pool. The only issue is they're not going to have a ton of time because he's going to be having his surgery here in a couple of days. The trade deadline is just over a week away, so certainly there's not much opportunity. If they'd have to make a move sooner than later, and they're not going to know the longer-term outcome of that injury. So we'll see. But they also have Samuel Girard, who's also expected to be out for about a month or so with an injury as well. So that would create a lot of LTIR room if either or was going to go on the long-term injury reserve. But we can't say we're certain. And if they put him on there, they won't be able to activate him until the playoffs. So we'll have to wait and see. But that could be some additional time there for the Avalanche to make some additional moves, but it's a little bit early to say they're going to be able to use anything like that since we're still pretty close to the deadline and we're quite a ways away likely from knowing more about their medical situations. Long absence, Montreal Canadiens defenseman Joel Edmondson's finally back tonight. Certainly happy to see him back. Obviously he's dealt with a lot due to injury and personal loss that he's dealt with this season. Nice to see Edmondson finally making his return to the Montreal Canadiens lineup. I know that they've definitely missed him. It's been a tough year in Montreal, but certainly nice to see some good news coming out of that organization as well recently here, with Edmonton's making his final return here to the lineup. They also announced that Andrew Hammond's going to be out for an indefinite period of time with, I believe it was a lower body injury. They wouldn't really put a timetable on it, so hard to say how long he's out. Obviously, his return to Montreal started off real good, then he got hurt. Carey Price continues as well to practice on the ice and train off the ice, but we still don't have any further updates or timetables on a Carey Price return to action either. Another potential signing that should be happening soon, but I believe because of the rules of the CBA, have to wait until past the trade deadline. But Jesperi Kotkaniemi and the Carolina Hurricanes appear to be closing in on an 8-year deal, somewhere below $5 million per season. Of course, they signed him to a $6.1 million offer sheet last year from the Canadiens in a 1-year deal. First successful offer sheet we've seen in a really long time. I know many were critical of the amount of money that they paid for him and said it was a big overpayment, which is why Montreal didn't match, which does make sense, I understand. But the whole play here was to get him signed long-term afterwards at a much better price tag, which they're certainly in line to do. He started a bit slow in Carolina, but has come around and certainly factors into their long-term plans at this point in time. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL trade rumors to look at. I want to start with the Ottawa Senators. Apparently, we have information today to suggest that the Senators have given permission to Victor Mete and his agent Darren Ferris the ability to speak with other teams to help find and facilitate a new deal to trade the defenseman who really hasn't been a regular in the lineup here for some time. It looks as though that they've got 6 or 7 guys playing ahead of him on a fairly consistent basis. He's played around 30 games this year, but he's been in and out. So it was a waiver pickup from Montreal. Signed him to another 1-year extension. I mean, he hasn't been all that bad, but based on what they have coming from the minor leagues and between what's going to be signed here soon in prospects like Jake Sanderson, who has given a commitment to sign with the Senators once his season at North Dakota is finished, there's just not really a lot of room there in the lineup. But Pierre Dorion did have an availability recently talking to reporters and admitted that obviously Sanderson and Tyler Clevin that is, were a couple of big important pieces that they see for the future. They've met with both of them recently at North Dakota. I know that Sanderson is going to be coming to Ottawa as soon as his season's over, so he'll likely get a few games in and burn off 1 year of his contract. Dorion also admitted that they are looking to make some moves at the deadline if he can find a dance partner, so to speak, to make some trades. Some of the veteran guys that they have up that likely they would be wanting to move are guys like Chris Tierney, possibly Zach Sanford for the right price. I would say Anton Forsberg appears to be off the market. I know I've heard some insiders like Elliot Friedman say that they think his name is out there, but based on what Dorian was saying today, and it makes sense really based on their goaltending situation, that they try to sign Anton Forsberg and keep him. He's been one of the few steady pieces between the pipes this year, with Matt Murray being unreliable when it comes to injury, as well as his unsteady play. So I'm not sure they're going to trade Forsberg, but I guess if somebody comes along with a ridiculous offer, maybe, but I don't see that happening. Another guy like Michael Del Zotto, who's in the minors right now, tearing it up, but really can't defend much at the NHL level. He can be had for a cheap price tag as well if somebody's willing to take on that contract. And there's even some other guys like Nick Paul, for example. If he's unsigned, it's possible that he's traded, but there is still a lot of optimism that between the Sens and his camp, they can get something worked out to keep him in the fold. Pierre Dorion also went on to admit that he feels the team needs another top 6 forward and another top 4 defenseman to really be more competitive and make big strides next year, which is kind of nice to hear him say, because it's been apparent for some time. The GM hasn't done a lot of media this year, so obviously to take that on, which takes a little bit of pressure off the coach, in my opinion, that he's doing okay with what he has to work with here, but they do need another piece. He said, maybe Jake Sanderson is that defenseman, which I think they need Sanderson and another solid veteran addition this offseason and another top 6 forward to kind of shore up that second line. Would go a long way as well to helping the team be a lot more competitive, along with, of course, a steadying presence between the pipes, which might just be Anton Forsberg here, at least on a short-term basis. Comes to Patrick Kane. Elliot Friedman did indicate in his latest podcast here that there is indeed definite interest in Kane from teams like the Rangers and the Avalanche. Now, this might not be something that happens before the deadline. Now, of course, as I was alluding to earlier, with the Avalanche having 2 players go down with injury that are going to be out for a month or a little bit better, that could open up an opportunity for a big LTIR window that could be something that they take advantage of, but we don't know that the injuries are significant enough and going to be long-term enough to really guarantee for that to happen. So this might be something that's more likely to happen in the summertime. He also indicated he's not sure that the Hawks are really ready at this point by the deadline to move on from either Kane or Taves or any of their core long pieces here that they've been, contemplating what to do with for the future, especially those two guys who have one more year left on their contract at over $10 million. It would not be an easy trade. It'd be complicated for sure, but at the same time, you have to think that if these teams come calling with some real serious interest in the right offers, it's going to at least have to be a conversation that they have. And if it's not something that happens by the deadline, then like I said, I think by the NHL draft, it's something that needs to be seriously considered. If Chicago's really going to go through a full rebuild, as Kyle Davidson has indicated here, then I think that guys like Kane and Taves will gain some interest, especially Patrick Kane's playing at a much higher level than Taves has. And really for some of these teams to get them for 1 year to make a run at a cup, I have no doubt they'd pay a pretty price tag to make that happen, which would really go a long ways as well to help in Chicago in their rebuild. When it comes to Marc-Andre Fleury as well, it's believed that he would not only like to maybe, be really particular about where he goes if he's traded by the deadline, but he would like to maybe even sign an extension. I know I've seen reporter Ben Pope post a recent article talking about Fleury and whether or not he'll be dealt and how that's all going to work out. And it does appear like there is some appetite from Fleury to be traded, but he wants to be very particular in where he ends up, because it might be a scenario that he might want to stay a little bit more than just the current season. Obviously, he's really concerned and wants it to be a good fit for his family, and he wants it to be a good fit for his hockey career, not only for the rest of this year and a shot at winning and having a shot at a Stanley Cup, but possibly maybe staying another season as well. Now, of course, we know that teams like Washington have had heavy interest there, and I know when Marc and Friedman were talking on the latest 32 Thoughts podcast that they kind of think maybe he might want to finish up in Pittsburgh, and if that's the case, he can't really bring it to himself to play for their longtime rival, the Washington Capitals. That very well could be a scenario that just doesn't work for him, even though they've been very interested in gunning after him pretty hard. But they're not the only team out there that's been interested. We mentioned the Maple Leafs. We've mentioned, to a degree, Edmonton. It's been a long time since they've been mentioned. The Avs have been in there as well. But besides Fleury, there's lots of goalies that can be had on the market. I just don't think there's anybody out there that's real serious impact goalie like Marc-Andre Fleury. And like I said yesterday, even though Vegas has totally denied it, with Leonard's situation, you can't help but wonder if that's a scenario that they would really look at bringing him back. I don't think the price tag is going to be that crazy, and he's got much more impact than any other goalie out there. So to me, that's going to be an interesting scenario to watch if he does not only get traded, but maybe signs a 1-year extension wherever he ends up. And he's going to have a lot of say in that. And obviously it's going to be, an interesting scenario to watch unfold here over the next 7 to 10 days. They also talked about, on the 32 Thoughts podcast, the Montreal Canadiens, as well as on the Jeff Marek show, talking about Ben Girard and the Habs here, and maybe that the Habs have set the asking price a little bit too high, which is why this trade hasn't happened. We've heard weeks ago that the Habs' new regime and Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton were ready and willing to make deals. Of course, we saw the Tyler Toffoli trade, and that Ben Girard was likely going to be next and was likely going to be coming in short order. They made it known that he was available, what the asking price was likely going to be, and really at the end of the day, nobody has met that offer. NHL executives from around the league apparently have been, showing interest, but not really ready to meet that asking price. And one of the main teams that remains the most interested from what the NHL reporters are saying is the St. Louis Blues. Now, the Blues are a team that's going to be interesting here as well. I think they'll make multiple moves. We talked about before, would they make a move in goal? I don't think they would. I know there's some people out there seem convinced that they might trade Binnington. And I'm not totally convinced that they won't. I just don't think it's going to happen now. Someday, sure. Maybe this summer, maybe, but not at the deadline. I think they'll want to load up here and make a run for it and have Binnington and Husso as the hopefully dynamic duo between the pipes to help them have some more playoff success this coming year. So we'll see where that goes. But the Ben Girard asking price might be too high. I know they were kind of using the whole David Savard to Tampa return, like the first round pick type of return. It seemed to be like the template that Montreal was expecting to follow, but maybe nobody's willing to pay that steep of a price for Ben Chiarot, but at the same time, I think he'd be a valuable piece to a variety of NHL teams out there looking for a solid, steady left shot D that can play physical, decent puck mover. Toronto comes to mind, St. Louis comes to mind, Edmonton comes to mind. Lots of teams out there that are gunning for the playoffs could use his services. And the only trouble, though, is do they want to give up that much? If they wait it out, maybe they can get away with a little bit less. But Montreal's probably hoping for the opposite, and then maybe they might get a last-minute bidding war and get something as either as much or more than they were hoping for. But asking price appears to be the holdup, which is not a huge shocker to find out in the case of Chiarot and the Montreal Canadiens. So let me know your thoughts on everything discussed here today down in the comments section. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and announcements as we approach the NHL trade deadline, which is March 21st, not all that far away. And of course, as I mentioned, I'll be heading back home from the trip here tomorrow. So either the next 1 or 2 videos will be back to the old normal studio setup at home as we come to a close here on vacation. Let me know your thoughts again on everything today. We'll discuss down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.